I have done my schooling from UP board, and I have done my graduation in polymer science and coating technology from Aligarh Muslim University. After completion my graduation, I do job for 4 months in a polymer industry as a production engineer. Then I do the job in industry. The idea comes in my mind. I have technical skills, but not have management skill. So I pursued post graduation. Then I completed my post graduation. So I can easily tackle the plant because I have management skills and technical skills.
Okay, so I think before we get on with the recap, I would like to comment on the presenters first. So, starting with Umar Moeen, who has done his BSc in computer applications and now wants to get into IT sector and some kind of technology firm. Now he explained he seems to have a good command over language and he explained his ideas. Maybe what I get from his weakness is that at times he gets into perfectionist mode. Is that so you are saying? And that creates problem.
Yes, sir, but not during the task, but after finishing it.
And my suggestion to you, Umar, is that in the introductions, just remain very matter of fact and remain confined to the factual details and don't get into philosophy kind of stuff. That may not go well with the person whom you are introducing yourself. Like it is okay to be misunderstood and all that. All those stuff should be avoided in the introductions.
Sure.
Because at this stage it is not desirable to philosophize unnecessarily. It is not required. You can talk about your weakness. You can say that at times I'm misunderstood and I'm working on it. So that may be a good philosophy, but saying that it is okay to be misunderstood, that's not actually a very right kind of personality orientation. Just think about it from employer's perspective. Will employer like it? If you say I'm misunderstood and I'm okay with it. You know? So look at things from other person's perspective. A person would like to interact with a person whom he can understand well. Okay, Khan Muhammad Sajid, you have a background of commerce and but I don't know whether this ability which you described, I do not compare with others. That could be described as a strength. I think you have to articulate it slightly differently.
Sir, that means that, sir, I just want to be a better version of myself from with each passing day. That's it.
So that
Right.
that is a different strength. You can say I have an excellence orientation and I try to improve gradually, but I do not compare. And when I improve, I see my own self, how I'm better than what I was the previous day, isn't it? So maybe this is what is actually problem in communication. What is there in our mind, our task is to convey it in the same manner to the other person. We may be having ideas, but are we able to communicate those ideas clearly to other person? And I wonder whether this 3 months experience can be called an achievement unless you have done some very substantial work over there and you can say, okay, I have done this during my job experience. Just merely working for 3 months may not be considered an achievement. Yes, if there was some content in the job which you feel was your contribution to the firm during those 3 months. But my personal take is that 3 months is too short a period for
So,
saying that.
sir, actually, it was a night shift, so I could not manage my routine. That's why I quit.
That's okay, but that cannot be considered an achievement. And Umar Mustafa, are you there?
Yes, sir.
So I like this idea. In fact, this personality orientation of yours, that you are into horse riding and you are seriously into it. You have participated in various leagues as well, and I wish you continue with this because sports persons have a way of connecting with other sports persons. That's a very different community than that gets developed. So I have seen this happening. Many of my students who have been into skating, who have been into hockey, for example, and they have played that too. So the camaraderie that they develop with the fellow equestrians or other players of the same league, that's very different. So maybe at some stage, I too will connect you to some of friends, old students who have been into horse riding, and that could be a good way to network and initiate your contacts with them. And we have some of our former students who have been into horse riding in a big way. Okay, so I'll connect you to them. And Farwa, you have done BCA, so and you have an interest in languages.
Yes, sir.
So that's but I think ultimately, if you want to make a good cocktail out of this
Yes,
combination,
sir.
you have to be good in at least one language, isn't it?
Yes, sir. Actually, I'm mainly working on JavaScript.
Uh, and especially see what could be of use in the contemporary world. I'm not very much aware of it, but whatever limited interactions I have had with people, they tell me that for this big data analytics, Python is a better language to
Yes,
grasp.
sir. Yes, sir.
And so, anyway, that's for you to make that judgment. But at least one language you should be so, you know,
Should have
proficient.
command on.
You should have so much of proficiency that you can actually, you know, say that you could be a good techno manager on that account.
Okay, sir.
I don't know whether this can be a good this could be classed as a weakness that you are a way too honest. Um, just think about it. What could be?
Sir, I meant to say that I'm a very straightforward person, because today people sometimes they just cannot accept the reality when
Again,
someone gives reality check.
don't make such judgments in your introductions that people are like that.
Okay, sir.
You talk about yourself that at times I'm a bit too straightforward, and because of that, I'm misunderstood,
Okay, sir.
or I rub shoulders with others in the wrong way.
Okay.
So I'm done. So don't make judgments that people don't like a straightforward people. Maybe someone may like very much a straightforward person,
Yes, sir.
isn't it? So avoid that.
Okay,
Now,
sir.
Imran, I think uh,
Yes, sir.
my observation on your introduction is that perhaps you need to very seriously think about your language skills, because
Yes, sir.
that will actually be the decisive factor in your, not your techno manager kind of profile that you are trying to exhibit for managerial career, basic communication skills, because from basic communication skills comes the ability to communicate comprehensively and clearly, isn't it? So
Yes,
maybe you have to focus on that during these 2 years, and that is going to play the decisive role in your future career. Okay. So just what is this course which you talked about? Where it is? I have not heard of it in the university. We have a course in
BWOC in,
BSc, it's BWOC.
no sir,
Okay,
BWOC in Polymer Science, Bachelor of Vocation.
it's a BWOC.
Yes, sir.
So if you want to leverage this course background, then language will play a crucial role. Okay,
Yes, sir.
that you
Inshallah,
know,
I will work on communication skill.
and join the class in time.
Okay, sir.
That also is a part of your personal management. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now let us start with the recaps.
Thank you, sir.
Uh, yes, sir. I should begin with the recap. So, yesterday, me and Arusha decided that there are 14 principles and we could divide it. And we asked this about this to
Yes. Yes.
Zareen ma'am, and
Yes.
she allowed us.
Please,
So,
please
shall
start.
I? Okay,
Yes.
just a minute. Sir, is my slide visible?
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. So, the topic of our today's discussion is the 14th principle of Henry Fjord. So, we began our discussion with the brief history of Henry Fjord, firstly. Henry Fjord was a French management theorist, and along with the theorist, he was also known to be the father of, he's still known to be the father of management theory. His perspective towards management was uh, at the shop floor. And as in earlier classes, we talked about scientific approaches of management by F.W. Taylor and his perspective towards management. And in this class, we learned about Henry Fjord perspective towards management, which is at the shop floor. During 1900, Henry Fjord, there was a company which was on the verge of bankruptcy, and Henry Fjord joined that company and introduced his policies. And after introducing his policy, the company managed to came out of that situation. And after his retirement, he wrote a book called Administration Industrielle General, which is in French, which was published in year 1917, and then it was translated in English in 1949. And in that book, there is the 14 principles of management. The first principle of management is division of work. Henry Fjord believed that work need to be divided into small tasks, and by dividing it into small tasks, the person could achieve specialization, and specialization could lead to efficiency and effectiveness of work. And suppose, for an example, um, like ma'am gave example, if a person who is specialized in the field of human resource get allotted into any different into domain of marketing, then he may take some time to adapt, and therefore it will lead to wastage of resources, wastage of time. So the person who is specialized already in that field gets need to be allotted there. So that is why the right kind of person should be given the task. Now the next principle is authority and responsibility. So, the authority means right to give order, and responsibility means to obligate that order. And Henry Fjord believed that there should be balance between authority and responsibility, as it lessens the burden on management, and also it gives subordinate to it gives confidence to subordinate. For example, let's take a case. Uh, they Suppose a sales manager was asked to clinch a deal, and and uh, a customer came and she feels that if she could have given her 60 days credit period, then she could clinch the deal, and it could fetch the company a margin of 50% profit. But as she was only given but uh, she was only given 40 days credit by the management. So there comes the imbalance between authority and responsibility, and this thing should need to be looked out. And this is why Henry Ford said that there should be balance between the both. And also, if you take this similar example, if the management should also not give her 100 days of credit, because if the authority is more, then the power will be misused. Now our next principle is discipline. In simple terms, disciplines means and uh, sincerity and obedience to organizational rule and employment agreements. It also means helps with the functioning of orderliness, and it also helps with the smooth functioning and orderliness. Suppose, for an example, if a company uh, suppose there is a conflict between a labor union and the top management, and still the labor union agreed to work for the sake of organization and for the sake of reviving the company out of loss, and after which the management decided to increase their wages. This is also a type of discipline set. And um, as there is no prejudice towards each other, and this is where the discipline lies. The next principle is unity of command. According to Fiol, there should be only one and one boss for every individual. It gives clarity about work, it brings clarity and relationship, and lessens the chance of conflict and chaos. For example, if you are a salesperson and you are asked to give 10% discount to a customer, but if your finance manager is asking you to cut it off to 5%, then here comes the violation of unity of command. And in this way, the subordinate will feel more frustrated, there will be conflict, there will be chaos, there will be delay in the work. So this principle focus to bring clarity in relationship. And our next principle is unity of direction, which means that all the units in the organization should move towards the same objective. There should be one head, there should be one plan. It ensures unity of action and coordination. And like for example, there are several departments in a company, like a finance department, human resource department. So department should try to meet their objective, but at the same time work on the objective of whole organization. So that is why this principle is what it focuses on. So next principle is subordination of individual interest to general interest. It means that the interest of organization should be given more priority. There are many individuals in the organization, they all have different needs and different background, different aspiration, but the need of organization should given priority, because if you are able to achieve the organization goal, then only you can achieve your personal goals. uh, n- then next principle is remuneration of employees, which means that all the employees in the company should be paid fairly and equitably, and it ensures good relations between workers and manager. For example, if any worker have given a good suggestion, or due to the hard work or due to the overtiming, you earn profit, then it is on the part of management to compensate them through various means. And um yes, and after that, the next principle is centralization and decentralization. Centralization basically means concentration of decision making, whereas decentralization means dispersal of the power.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Iram. This this part is mine.
Okay, okay, fine. So
And
can I
please,
complete it? Because it
and
is
I request both of you to please manage the time also. You know, you have been allotted 5 minutes each, and you have overshot the time.
okay, sir.
Good morning, everyone. So I'll start from the eighth principle, that is centralization. It basically means that decision making happens at the top of the organization tree with the executive board. Decentralization is the opposite. It pushes decision making as far down as the organizational chart as possible. Fuel doesn't state that you should have a centralized or decentralized organization, but instead that this decision should be deliberate and appropriate to the operating needs of the organization. Moving on to the next principle, that is Scalar Chain. He called it the chain of superiors, where you would go up the chain and then cut across the organization somewhere, and then down the chain of command, speak to somebody on the other side. Of course, people believe that in many cases it would be much more efficient to let people talk directly, and so as long as it is okay with the supervisors, he said that it could be done. And the 10th principle is order. That meant the right men in the right place. They used the word men instead of people to form an effective and social order. So manager has to put people in the right place to get the best out of everybody, which is basic requirement of any organization. Moving on to the next principle, that is equity. He had a desire for equity and the equality of treatment when dealing with people. He saw this as a right combination of kindness and justice. Managers should treat everyone fairly at all times, which means being both consistent in your consistent in your praise and consistent in your discipline. Treating employees fairly increases employee retention, which is again eventually good for any organization. And moving on to the next principle, that is stability of tenure of personnel. It is important for employees to have job security. The reason for this is that lack of job security leads to action that don't align with the goals of organization, which is quite dangerous. Managers should also understand that it can take time for new employees to settle into their new environment and learn their jobs, how they are done, how they are managed. Employees should be given sufficient time to show their performance so that you can judge on their performance. Moving on to the second last principle, that is initiative. Management should encourage productivity and the showing of initiative at all levels within the organization. Encouraging employees with the organization and encouraging employees to use their initiative should be seen as a source of strength for the organization. It also gives employees an increased sense of job satisfaction. The push to allow employees to use their initiative needs to be balanced within the employee's authority. The rules of equity should also be there, should still apply. Moving on to the next principle, that is the last principle, that is esprit de corps, which basically means team spirit. Management should strive to create a sense of shared goals and team spirit within their team. This includes encouraging employees to work to the best of their abilities, well as sharing that they have learned with others. You know, a little bit informal here, but there is no तुम अपना देखो मैं अपना देखूंगा in an organization, in a management team. You have to work as a team to achieve any sort of goal in an organization. Now, I would just like to, conclude all the points here. So when this model first came into existence, when this model was first introduced, it gave managers a simple way to understand all the functions that a manager need to perform. Fuel stated very clearly that these principles are not rigid, they are quite flexible. And when you even read his books, General and Industrial Management, you will see lots of lists and lots of categories. And really, that was his goal. It doesn't read like a narrative, like a well developed story. It reads like a beginning. He is laying a foundation for others to build on, which people eventually did. Thank you, everyone. This was the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Arusa and Aram. Both of you did a very good job in terms of covering the content, except for the time management part, especially on the part of Aram. She has a very teacher-like style of presenting, so she takes a bit more time than actually allotted to her. But overall, she did a good job. And Zareen ma'am, I think next time we have to monitor this time part very,
जी
because
sir.
then we hardly have time to discuss things. Just a few comments on the core ideas that they discussed, just as a kind of explanation. It is good that Aram clarified that this book actually was originally published in the year 1917, actually. And because the English version came in 1949, much later, the ideas of Fayol were available to the general world much afterwards. Although he was a contemporary of Taylor, with some disturbance at some level. Okay, so the ideas of Fayol were available to the contemporary world much later, and that is why, I mean, there was a lag between his ideas and the development of the theory of management. French, as you know, are very particular about their language, and so it took a rather long time to let those, I think 22 odd years, to even more than that, to let those ideas come out. And it would have been good. And the way Arusa has ended, actually, there is nothing rigid in his principles. He is very flexible with the principles. Even this principle, for example, of centralization. He is not saying that you should have a centralized organization or you should have a decentralized organization. You should have an appropriate mix. An appropriate mix would depend on so many things. It would depend on situations also. For example, suppose there is a sine die in the university, or there is a disturbance in the university, or there is some external which we have experienced, for example, in the past, either because of internal factors or because of some external factors. Suppose there is a riot in the city. Naturally, in that situation, the vice chancellor will have all the powers. All the decision making, which earlier, let us say, were in the hands of provosts and all that, he would say, no, in this situation, I will decide what is to be done. For example, whether the university is to remain closed or we have to arrange for vacation for students vacating the hostels. So, in that situation, everything is centralized when there is a disturbed situation. Or suppose there is a recession, and for example, there was a time when I was aware, I was connected to a company which was faced with a serious liquidity crisis. Now, in that situation, the purchase manager otherwise had the authority to, let us say, pay off the bills of the vendors. And on his clearance, the finance manager would arrange the funds. But in this situation, the chairman said that no, no outflow should be without my permission. And he clearly identified the vendors and he said, all the big vendors may not be paid at this juncture, but all small vendors we will pay. And he had a personal word with every big vendor and told him that there is a crisis that we are in, and please bear with us. We will tide over this phase. But he didn't stop payment for the smaller vendors. So ideally, a decision which should have been taken by purchase manager was taken by the chairman of the company. So there is nothing rigid in there. In fact, that is why this use of principles is very instructive. He didn't say laws of management. He says principles. Principles are always flexible, isn't it? And this point, which I have already discussed, that he has a top person's view of things, isn't it? Even his examples, if you read his original co- explanation of these ideas, which is available in a book called Classics in Management, there he, in just one example, will explain his mindset with which he was proposing the principles. The example that he used for explaining division of work. The division of work was, for example, was the focus of Taylor also. When he was talking about, identify jobs and the best way to do those jobs, he was also talking of the division of labor. But Fjord took the example of animal world, and he said, we have the smallest animals which are called protozoans. Now, unicellular organisms, like for example, amoeba. Now, all the life support functions in a unicell organism is performed by one cell only. But the moment the complexity evolves in the animal world, there are specialized organs like human beings. They have their respiration system, they have their nervous system, they have their digestive system, they have their, circulation, respiratory system, like that. But in amoeba, all these functions are performed by one person. So the moment you have two persons in the organization, some kind of division of work is required. Maybe they say, okay, I will focus on external part of management and you will focus on the internal part, internal function. So like that. So this gives an example of the mindset of Henry Fjord, but you have to keep in mind in this idea that all these principles are situation specific. There is nothing rigid about them. So, Zareen ma'am, I think we have already overshot the time. It's already 9:40. So maybe when we meet next, we will talk about the third school. We have covered two schools up till now. The classical school, which included these two schools, the scientific management and Henry Fayol's administrative theory. And we have talked about human relations school. We have discussed its extended part also, the behavioral school, where focus is on not on just human relations skills, but a wide range of skills, a wide range of needs that human beings have, starting from physiological needs to the self-actualization need. So we will in the next class move on to the third school, which is the management science school or the quantitative school. So I wish you all a happy Republic Day. Those of you who are in Aligarh, they may come to the department uh, for flag hosting, which will be held at 8:45 tomorrow. So those of you who can make it, I invite you to come to the department. Maybe you'll have a chance of physical interaction also then. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
Thank you
sir.
so much,
Thank
sir.
you,
Happy
sir.
Republic
Thank
to
you,
you
sir.
too,
Thank
sir.
you, sir.
Happy
Thank
Republic
you.
Day.
Happy Republic.
Happy Voters Day and sir, Republic Day.